So today's webinar is basically an overview of a 4-year project. Rachael Botting, she's water. She's on staff here at Wheaton and helps with our graduate program as a professor and is working with me on this project. And we're really excited to share it with you guys today. So here's what we're going to talk about, kind of what the project is, look at some findings, and open up an opportunity for engagement. If you're not already, we do have opportunity for camps to join us at this point. So here's the mission of the project. It's to seek to empower parents and caregivers in family faith formation. So the focus of the project is family faith formation. And it came because Lily was looking at the reality that a lot of research is showing that 60–70% of kids that grow up in the church leave the church when they leave the home. And it's like, what's going on if we're, as families, not even raising our kids in the faith to the place where they stick with it? And you have books like Faith for Exiles and Sticky Faith from Kara Powell that kind of talk about strategies for helping our kids stick in the faith. And so it's the focus of their initiative was family faith formation, and they put $60 million toward it and invited organizations that would deal with this problem to participate. 400 organizations applied, and 60 received grants of about $1 million to 1.2 each, and 6 or 7 of those 60 were camps, one of which was us here at Wheaton and Honey Rock. And so our focus was on how camp can work as a partner with the church to impact family faith. A lot of the other ones didn't involve church. Some were churches. Ours is unique in that it's camp church addressing this concern with family faith formation. And our vision is by the end of the project, in which the project ends December 2027, we started in 2023, is to enable camps to be training centers for equipping parents and churches on developing resilience and disciples. So one of the phrases we've used is that camp is a catalyst for family faith formation, working in partnership with the local church. And our goal is to discern strategies that help this happen and do research on them so that we can see which strategies are most effective and then share that with the camp world. Here's our team, myself and Rachael, Dr. James Cornwell, who's works in our psych department at Wheaton College. He's in charge of all the doctoral research. He's our statistician, data analysis junkie, an absolute expert in it. And the stuff that he's doing with what we're collecting is amazing, and you'll see that in a little bit. We have an administrative team from Wheaton, and then we have an advisory team, and Dr. Muhia Karianjahi is on the call here. He's a prof in our graduate program, but he also is on our advisory team. But you can see we have a representative from our 3 partner organizations, and then a collection of researchers that are helping us along the way. Grow Faith Together was built as a partnership. So we have 3 denominational camp associations, if you want to call 3CA, the Evangelical, United Methodist, and then National Lutheran Outdoor Ministry, which is Missouri Synod Lutheran. We have camps from all 3 of these organizations and camps from Lutheran Outdoor Ministry Association, which is the ELCA outdoor camp group, all participating. And then you can see our partnership is home, church, and camp, and how do these 3 work together for family faith formation. The project had 4 phases. Phase 1, 23, 24, we basically just reviewed the literature, and we worked with a few camps, and I'll show you that in a second, to kind of identify promising practices. Phase 2, which was this past year, and we're just about finished year 1 of phase 2 of the project, where we had 9 camps partner with us. And we basically, what are the interventions we found in year 1 of the research? We tested them at these camps, and then we did a series of surveys with camper parents to see which interventions had an impact. We are now, this phase 2 continues for another year with those 9 camps, but we're adding about 20 to 25 more camps for phase 3, where we are doing a little bit different training with these camps. Last year with our 9 core camps, we 1 to 2 day training in person. All the camps had to bring their partner churches to the training, very labor intensive and complicated. This year we're doing the training online, and then we're also providing resources to camps and saying, just use the resources and see what you come up with, so that we're testing 3 different types of training modalities to see which one is more effective. And if the ones that are less time intensive are equally effective, then we can proceed with those after the project's over. So that's kind of the role of phase 3, and where camps that aren't participating can join us if they'd like. Phase 4 is 2027. About a year from now, when we finish all the data collection, we'll have 12 months to just dig through the mountain of data we've created and write and share about what we've learned. So here's a review of the exploratory phase, just to give you a sense of what we did. So we did a massive literature review. We gathered director input from 75 camps through a survey from the 3 associations. And then we followed up with 20 transcripted interviews, analyzed the qualitative data from that. So this happened during the school year, this happened in the spring, and then in the summer, we visited 11 of the camps that rose to the surface from this previous step that seemed to be doing things in line with what we're trying to figure out. So we visited those camps, spent 2 to 3 days, did focus groups, watched the program, and basically did a qualitative study of each of these camps. And then the last thing we did was we sent out surveys to the parents of all of these camps, these 11 camps, to see what the parents were experiencing, what their perceptions of camp were, what their perceptions of faith formation relative to camp were. And so all of that year 1 resulted in some findings. And here's some of the key findings. First is that Christian camps are broadly effective at impacting personal faith and of the participants, but frequently lack a holistic approach to faith formation and influencing faith beyond camp. So in other words, camps are focused on the kid while they're at camp, and that's kind of it. It's not really about the families. It's not about connecting them with churches. It's about giving them a short-term event-like experience. That is faith-based and important, but it's not about this holistic year-round partnership picture. Second key finding is that robust models for incorporating camp and faith formation include strategies accounting for campers, parents, and church leaders. So all 3 different groups, and at 3 different phases, before, during, and after camp. Oftentimes in Christian camping, and this was one of the articles that we wrote about, is we've thought about follow-up, and camp follow-up is one of the things that's in our language. But what about preparing kids for camp? And if the main thing the kid gets on the way to camp is a packing list and when to show up, we're missing an opportunity. So there's more we can do before. What are we doing during camp? And then what are we doing after camp? As it relates to both the church and the parent, not just the kid. And so there were a few of our camps that we visited that were doing things with all 3 populations at all 3 time phases. And that's kind of what really turned the project, which you'll see in a minute on the next slide. So what we saw was that camps that were doing well and had a holistic picture had purposeful interventions for campers, purposeful interventions for parents, purposeful interventions for churches at all 3 phases. While at camp, so they're actually doing things with parents while the kids are at camp. Having the churches involved while the kids are at camp, but then you also have away from camp, which at the time in year 1, we just said away from camp to include before and after. what you'll see as the projects progress, we're getting very specific with what are we doing before and what are we doing after. But here they're just sorted by away from camp. So touch points is like other things that happen, programs that happen during the year, take home resources, a Bible study after camp, conversation starters, family devotions, take home resources. That's where discussion starters for parents with their kids, supplemental programs during the year, and then targeted communication. And then churches, how camps are involving them away from camp is sending camp to church, having camp programs happen at church during the year, and resourcing churches on camp. And there's a lot more that we've uncovered, but these are things we found in that first year of exploratory work. So just to highlight the phases of camp, we have 5 phases of camp. Phase 1 is preparation. What happens before, and this is communicating with parents and raising expectations, training staff, and then entry rituals is that important first 24 hours when they come in where you're trying to shape goals and culture and set expectations and build community. Then you have everything that happens in the immersion experience, which is represented by this. And then pre-exit rituals is the last 24 hours before they leave when their brain is starting to go towards home. How do we help conclude camp? How do we help them name the lessons, the change, what they've discovered? How do we help them prepare for the challenges of going home? That's all pre-exit. And then lastly is intentional integration. And this is how do we bridge the gap between camp and home, which involves preparing the home and the church as much as we've done preparing the child to go home. And so one of the things that's really risen over the last year, which Rachael will talk more about in a minute, is the importance of the pickup. And camps that have a longer pickup versus just check in, get the kid, get their luggage, leave. But camps that have a conversation with the parents, like as a big group meeting, camps that let the parents participate in camp a little bit, and even more, camps that let the parents talk to the counselors. One camp has one-on-ones, 15 minutes, counselor and every camper's parent. That's where you're starting to prepare the home and more than just have an experience and send the kid off. So these are the phases of temporary community, the phases of camp that we kind of unpacked during that first year that you're going to hear a lot more about as we proceed. So key finding number 3 is camps have the opportunity to be training centers. And oftentimes we think about for campers, but we don't think about for parents. And one of the key things we found, and this is from the parent surveys that first year, you can notice what's the purpose of camp. The number one thing for parents, extremely important to very important, 97% to have fun. Grow faith, learn about God is 92%. Strengthen character, we're at 93%. That's a little bit more than that. But notice down here at the bottom is that 64% of parents think that one of the purposes of camp is to be equipped. When you talk to camp leaders, that's not even on their radar. It's not even in their mind. So it's an opportunity that we have is to influence parents as they're interacting with us, with their kids. And so we're trying to equip camps with A, the mindset to be training centers, and B, the skills, the competencies, what do you actually teach? The last finding is highly engaged church leaders and parents envision camp as part of a developmental ecosystem. So one of the things we found, and Rachael will cover this a little bit more, is that at camps, there's generally families that are highly engaged in church and faith formation and for them, camp is a critical piece to the holistic development of their child. It might also include sports and music or whatever it might be, but camp is a critical piece. But then you have families that are sending their kids to camp that aren't engaged in church very much. And for them, camp is more of the place I send my kid for the spiritual thing. And so what we're trying to do is create this vision, both with camps, pastors, and parents, that camp should be and can be a critical piece to a holistic developmental approach for your kids. And Rachel's dissertation for her PhD was actually on the impact and the role that camp plays when it's a year by year by year by year thing. So this is a key hope for outcome too of our project. So that's phase one. That's kind of an overview. I'm going to pause there for questions, comments, and then Rachel's going to take us through some of the data that we've actually found. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Do you know what out of those camps that were all part of the first phase, how many of them were what you might call like program camps, doing like an individual sign up type of camp, and how many were actually under the banner of a church?
Well, of our 9 core camps, for the first year, I can't remember from exploratory year of the 11 camps, but we had been very purposeful about having a third of our camps are from the Lutheran outdoor ministry, a third are Methodist, and a third are 3CA. There have been a couple that were part of the Lutheran or Methodist that were also 3CA, but we've been really purposeful making sure that it's a balanced across. And to my knowledge, I mean, we're only working with part of our parameters for our study were camps that were camper individual sign up in the summer, I believe. Am I right on that, Rach? I think that's right. We didn't have group-based camps.
Yeah, so in order to be part of the study at every point, you've had to offer 6 weeks of summer camp programming. We didn't dictate whether or not you had to sign up as a camp like individual or as a church. However, in the initial phases, we did gather that information. We didn't have any camps that just strictly did that. We had some camps like Mount Hermon, for example, where like you kind of have the option, and sometimes you end up in cabins by yourself or with other kids. It just kind of depends on how you set it up. But by and large, it's people with individual signups that we're working with for the purposes of this study, but I would say not exclusively per se.
All right, any other questions? All right, Rachel.
All right. We're not going to switch screen share here. So Rob's going to keep the screen up and I'll just kind of give direction on following along. So in the second phase of the project, we wanted to dive into looking at the impact of our interventions, but also begin to ask some more of our bigger questions with this group of campers so that we can track changes over time. So the idea, at least in theory, was that we started with these camps, we did a parent survey, we did some in-depth trainings, and now we want to go ahead and assess, okay, what's changing over time, and are there things that are impacting whether or not things are changing over time? So overarching goal was to test some of these promising strategies at our 9 partner camps. So we can go to the next slide, Rob. Big picture goals here. At the end of this phase, we're trying to do the following. First, test and develop a list of strategies that are effective in impacting faith formation in the home and helping the growth and learning of camp to impact life throughout the year. We've actually just sent this into design, but we have a list of strategies that our camps have done. There's about 66 to 67 of them. We don't necessarily know that all of them work towards all of these goals, but we've assembled a list as this is what people are doing. Now we kind of want to refine that and figure out, okay, what are the things that you can do that will help move the needle on multiple outcomes at once? Second, we want to try to refine the model for partnership. So we are learning with our camps that in some settings, partnership is really natural, especially in denominational settings where some camps may even be owned by some of the churches that they're partnering with. It's more natural versus other sites where you have up to 60 different church, maybe even more, that are sending kids to your camp and not necessarily coming through the church. But if you were just to ask people what church do you go to, like the list is so long, you can't even begin to reach out to all of those people. And so in that sense, it feels more challenging, but we want to try to see if we can develop a model for how to develop those partnerships based on your context. And then thirdly, finally, this will probably be like 6 months from now, we're hoping to be able to show how engaging these practices can grow, deepen, and expand the impact of camps and churches. This requires a lot of that statistical analysis that we're doing, but it also requires diving into a lot of our qualitative data, which just takes a lot of time. But big picture, we want to go from, oh, hey, here's some cool ideas, to here are the ideas. Here are the things that you should do if you want to move towards these goals. So our partner camps, we had 9 total, 3 in each category. You can see the names of them here. We're expanding this in the next phase, like Rob said, to 20. So you can see in the next one how they lay out geographically. They're pretty well spread across the US for the most part. And again, that was intentional, just to acknowledge differences in context and geography even. So here were our big research questions. I'm just going to kind of run through these and then we'll start looking at some actual data. I'll also say we're still trying to answer these. I don't have like perfectly clear answers to all of these yet. We just got off the phone before this with Dr. Cornwall talking through another element of these questions. And so in our incoming reports over the next couple of months, hopefully we'll have some more refined answers to these questions. But this is what we've been trying to figure out. First, does camp influence frequency of family faith practices? That's the overarching goal of the Lily Project and therefore the overarching goal of our project. Is camp playing a role in the frequency with which families are engaging things like church attendance, family devotionals, family prayer at various points during the day, conversations between parents and kids? We've broken out family faith practices into 2 categories. So the first is more church-oriented practices. So attending church, serving in church, going to youth group, participating in different Christian ed type programs. Then the other category is more home-based practices. So praying together as a family, talking about God and faith, doing family devotionals, going outside and enjoying creation together. That's in the home-based one. So we've got those 2 categories, and we want to understand, are we seeing changes over time? And can we attribute any aspect of the camp experience to that? Secondly, what do parents perceive to be the goals and purposes of Christian summer camp? In the earliest phase of the study, we learned that philosophy matters and that what people think about camp impacts how they engage the experience and what they expect to get out of it. That means that if we want to be able to help parents maximize what camp offers in terms of faith formation, we have to help them better understand what camp is about and what it's for. So we're measuring changes in parent belief. Really simple example, we ask the question on every single survey. We ask parents to rate their agreement with this statement. Christian summer camp is an important tool for family faith formation. We want to track our parents changing their responses, hopefully growing over time. Fourth, in what ways do parent perceptions and existing family faith practices influence the impact of summer camp? So if we pull those 2 things together, what interactions are we seeing? And then finally, what are camps doing to increase partnership, and to what extent are those interventions influencing family faith practices? So you can see there's a lot of different streams, there's a lot of different variables. This is where the statistics become really important, but that's the overarching picture of what we're going after here. I'm not going to go through everything. You can find our most recent report on our website if you wheaton.edu/honeyrock/growing faith together. And just kind of scroll down to the reports section of the web page, which I believe is being updated and refreshed today because it had some issues the last couple of days. But you can find the fall report, which has T1, T2, and T3. So that's all the way up to the third survey. The fourth survey we just closed, so it will hopefully have that data in a month or two as well to share. So some initial findings. One of the things we asked parents was just to give us their general impressions of various aspects of the camp experience. A lot we could talk about here. I'm just going to highlight some important things that I think are important. First, that very first line you can see, equipping you as a parent or caregiver to continue the positive impacts of camp in the home. So you can see from this that like 89, 90%, kind of if you lump all those together, maybe a little less, like 85-ish. If you include the unsures, it'd be a little higher if you take those out. Say that they're satisfied with what camp is doing in that area. Interestingly, we ask a similar question, but worded differently. We asked parents to tell us how important various goals of camp were, and we used this exact wording. How important is this goal? Equipping you as a parent or caregiver to continue the positive impacts of camp in the home. Only 66% said that it was important, either very important or extremely important, the higher ends of that scale. So what this tells me, parents are saying, yeah, we're satisfied with it, but not everyone's saying it really is a goal for them. And so this again highlights that philosophy piece a little bit. Part of what we're struggling with is we need to get parents to view camp less as a mountaintop and more of what I call a discipline of retreat, and engage it through that lens. On the flip side, though, if we kind of look at something similar but different, we asked for parent impressions of how the camp was doing, fostering spiritual formation and teaching the Christian faith. And a vast majority of them are saying they're satisfied with that and that it's a goal of the Christian camp experience. And so, again, if you just compare those things, like parents are generally sending their kids to camp because they want them to grow in faith in some capacity, but they might not have the right understanding of the role that camp is designed to play in that overarching faith experience. So that's parent impressions. The next thing we're going to show you is just a chart of some parent perceptions, comparing partner and non-partner church families. So in our data, we have all summer camp parents filling out these surveys, and we're asking them to tell us whether or not they're part of one of these partner churches or not. So in the non-partner category, this would be people that are attending a church that has not explicitly partnered with the camp. It would also include people that are not attending church at all. Now, I will say our sample is highly faith-based. What I mean by that is, in general, the vast majority are engaging church. They're believers. They're praying in the home. Faith is important to them, right? So there's not a ton of non-church attenders in that non-partner church list, but they are in there. And we asked them some of these core beliefs about camp, and you can see there's some differences there. So partner church families generally seem to believe that camp is an important tool for fostering faith in their children to a greater degree than non-partner church families. Why that is, we have a lot to wrestle with and figure out, but observationally we can observe, okay, there might be something here. When a camp and a church are working closely together, parents might get the message a little bit more strongly that camp is important in this life of faith. Technology piece, we didn't see a ton of differences. This question about integrating faith practices into every aspect of camp life. We don't see a lot of differences here, but I'll just give a brief comment on that. This is an interesting question because what we have seen in previous studies is that for some parents that are less religious, they want their kid to be exposed to faith at camp, but they don't want it to be beaten over their heads, or they don't want the kid to be brainwashed, right? And so they would say, like, yeah, I want them to learn about God, but I don't want you to fill every waking moment with faith. Then there are other camps and other families who say, yeah, when you're rock climbing, you should be learning about the faithfulness of God, right? So in our sample, we're again seeing more of those faith-based families. So we don't see as much different on this question, but there are other studies that have parsed that out a little bit further. Likely no surprise here. It's clear that camp and local church are close partners. You're seeing much higher rates of agreement with partner churches than non-partner. Not surprising at all. This last question in that category about finding it difficult to talk with your children about God and faith, much higher levels of agreement with partner churches. That means that people from partner churches are having a harder time talk with their kids about faith. I got to be honest, I have no idea why that is, but I know that it's there and it's something that we're wrestling with. Would be curious if you have any answers for me. And then second graph here, and then we'll get to Chelsea's question. Importance of various goals of camp. So this is where I mentioned in the previous slide where we asked them to just kind of say how important each one of these are. All parents want their kids to have fun, to make friends, grow in social skills, grow in faith. Not a ton of difference in these first couple categories of goals. We saw a slight significant difference in the equip and influence families, but it's really not large enough to talk much about. And then that last one, deepen family engagement with their local church, is opposite of, or sorry, not opposite, is in line with what we would expect a little bit with partner churches saying, yeah, this is part of our picture of faith. So, and these are all mean scores, by the way. So the core beliefs about camp is out of 6, and the importance of various goals of camp is out of 5. Chelsea, yeah, question?
It turned into 2, but I'll try to keep them quick.
Yeah.
The first one, and you probably got to it all already, or you're planning on it. If we look at these scores from like demographics of the parents, do they change significantly?
Wow, which demographics in particular?
Oh, top of my head, I'm thinking like race and income and
Yeah.
Multiple versus single parent household. I don't know, just thinking.
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. So the race and ethnicity one, we can't really look at, unfortunately, because our sample is like 96% white families. So we don't, which is pretty standard for Christian camp research, unfortunately. Something we need to press into for sure. So we don't really have it on that. We didn't ask about income. We have seen in previous phases, actually, a difference in response based on whether the mom or the dad fills out the survey. That's an analysis. I haven't run this one yet. This survey is about 80% moms. And again, I haven't quite run it yet. Another way to look at this data is looking at church employees versus lay people, right? There's a lot of different demographics that we can look at. We haven't quite dove into that yet, but certainly something we could explore and probably should explore down the road. So good question. No answer.
Got it. Perfect. My second one was clarification. So if you are a parent of a partner church, does that mean you attend the church that sponsors the camp? So there's like a direct line?
Sometimes. So
Okay.
we asked camps to recruit churches. We asked for them to recruit a minimum of 5. There were a couple camps that didn't quite meet that quota, but minimum of 5, as many as I think 13 in one camp. And what we were asking them to do is say, okay, go talk to these churches and say, hey, will you partner with us for the next 2 years? Will you engage in conversations? Will you attend a training retreat? Will you commit to implementing some of these church-based strategies in your congregation? And those churches in writing wrote back and said, yes, we will do that. And in order to be accepted to be part of this project, camps had to have those letters of commitment from those camps. There are some cases in one of the UMCRM ones, I believe, and 1 or 2 of the Lutheran ones where the camps are owned by the denomination and the churches within that conference or region or district, however it's laid out, are part of the denomination that owns the camp. So, but you didn't have to have that to be part of the project. So yes and no, I would say, but by and large, no, it's not like they were forcefully sending their kids, like you can't go anywhere else, but there's some situation where they were owned by them.
Okay, so a non-partner camp would be one that didn't do the engagement.
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
They might still own the camp, technically speaking, along with their others, but they didn't provide written, like, we're going to partner with you. They didn't come to the training retreat. They're not engaged in our surveys, anything like that.
Gotcha. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, part of what the difference is and why it's important is that partner churches, we're actually doing intervention with the staff of those churches. So camp has 6 to 8 partner churches. The partner churches are participating in training from us on how to use camp at church. And so if you're a camper from a non-partner church, that means you're going to church, but your church is not getting the intervention training that we're giving to the partner churches.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Because part of what we're hoping to discover is that if churches partner with camps, better things happen than if camps run solo.
Right. And part of it is that, and we learned this when we did our trainings, church leaders misunderstand camp pretty significantly, actually. Like we start talking about temporary community and the feasts and festivals as theological foundations for camp, and these church leaders are like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about before. That's brilliant. This makes so much sense. And you just see these light bulbs going off. And we had 3 pastors from all the different retreats that we did within a month of our retreat did a sermon on temporary community and sent us the link. And we're like, look, I integrated all of this. And they were so excited. But the idea is like these camp leaders are sitting at home, and we have research to back this up, thinking these camps are stealing my youth. They're giving them these mountaintop experiences that I can't compete with, right? And there's a sense of disdain actually towards camp, but it's because they misunderstand what camp is about. And to be honest, sometimes camps fail to accurately articulate what they're really about. I have a personal pet peeve with the phrase best week of your life, because it's like you tell this kid it's the best week of your life, and then you're surprised when they go home sad. You basically just told them that the remaining 51 weeks of their life are going to be miserable, right? Like it's well intended, but we're setting them up for failure. And so I think a lot of times we're inaccurate in the ways we talk about camp, and church leaders can be part of that too. So by partnering with these camps, they're learning a different language for how to talk about camp, different way to communicate its value to their members. And then being more intentional with engaging some of these strategies. So anyway, more than you needed, but opened a can of worms for me.
Yep. And that's really one of the core things is we have to teach camps the role of temporary community is not to be an end to itself, it's to enhance permanent community. And that means partnering with the permanent community, building up the permanent community, because if you look at scripture, all the temporary communities of scripture, wilderness journeys, Sabbath, festivals, these were not for the sake of that moment. They were the sake of being different back home. And so that's the message we're trying to pound into camps and churches and parents, and give tools to make it happen. All right, we should roll. Here you go. Next slide.
Next slide. So this is a big chart. This focuses on the family-based family faith practices. So I just wanted to give you an insight into some of the complexity of what we're working with. So on the left, you can see some of the faith practices that we measured. The 9 categories are our 9 camps. So instead of listing their names, we have our 9 camps. And the percentages is the percent of people that showed an increase in that faith practice from before camp to October. We didn't measure faith practices in the week after camp because it wasn't enough time really to be meaningful. So this would be from like May to October. And we wanted to know what percentage of people at each camp and in the sample as a whole are showing a positive change in some of these faith practices. And so I show this just to show that there's a lot of variety in each item based on the camp. And that's making this difficult because camps recruit different people, different types of people. They're focused on different goals. They do different things. And none of that is bad. Part of what we're trying to figure out is, are there certain things that all these camps are doing or can do that will move the needle in one way or another? So if we look at, for example, conversations with children about God and faith, that second item, Camp 6 has a higher percentage of people that are showing growth in that area than the average. So in our last meeting with them, we sat down and said, okay, Camp 6, tell us what you're doing and why you think you might be more effective at this than others. And through conversation, we're able to kind of parse that out a little bit. Camp 5, prayer with children at bedtimes. What are you doing to help your campers and your families grow so much in frequency of prayer? That camp in particular was sending home bedtime prayer cards. It's like, okay, obviously this makes sense. You're sending home a targeted intervention a tool for them to use at that time, and it's super effective at moving the needle on that. Now, no camp should be going and saying, let's try to help people grow in all 8 of these areas at once, right? Sometimes I think there can be that tendency. Again, we're just trying to learn, are there things that hit multiple of these at once? Is context the main factor that plays a role here? But you can see from this chart that there's a lot of variety in outcomes based on the camp, but that generally speaking, if I had to put a number on it, I'd say we're seeing about 1/3 of people are showing growth in some of these faith practices on the whole. Well, the next slide. So Rob mentioned this a little bit at the beginning, but we wanted to assess parent engagement in the camp experience, a couple different elements of the camp experience. This is the first one. So time spent at drop-off and time spent at pickup. So some of our camps bus their kids. So we have the someone else dropped off category includes a lot of those people that bus up their kids. But in general, we're seeing parents, the vast majority, spending less than 1 hour at drop off. And less than 1 hour is certainly the majority. At pickup, 1 to 2 hours makes up the rest. Very few spending more than 2 hours. Now, in terms of programming, one of our big points that we've been talking about throughout this whole thing is parents need to understand what camp is for. Our question is, can you help parents understand what camp is for in less than an hour at drop-off and an hour and a half at pickup? I would argue no. Do you have to add time? Not necessarily, but then I would say, what else are you doing outside of those contact points through email, through social media, through phone calls to help parents learn what camp is for and the role that it's playing? This is not a lot of time spent with parents, and so we would have to be creative to find other ways to reach out to them or expand the length of time that we offer. I just heard from one camp in Texas this morning, actually, that said that they're considering offering she called it a tour-orientation. It's like a mix of the word tour and orientation, because the laws in Texas now have changed so dramatically and they're dealing with a lot of parent questions. And so what they've decided to do is offer drop-off windows. So you can drop off your kid, and then for 2 hours after that, you can go with a staff person and do a tour and learn about the curriculum and talk with the director and have a snack at the cafe. And they're kind of like staggering these things so that they can have more time with parents while their kid has already been checked in and is under the care of the camp counselor. So just as an example of things that camps are doing to try to increase the amount of time they have with parents. Next slide. We asked specifically about closing programs because we found that a lot of camps were doing them, but we didn't know how many people were attending and we didn't know what the impact was. So 64% of people in our sample, at least, attended a closing program. 27% chose not to, and 9% said they didn't know about it, or they're like, I don't know how to answer this question. So vast majority attending closing program. And then what impact did it have? So we're definitely seeing an impact on desire to return next year. That's marketing gold if you're a marketer in here. Good fodder for conversation with your program team. Higher levels of agreement and your ability to help your child transition home from camp. So we've got like 58 people saying a lot to a great deal of impact. 75% saying a lot to a great deal of impact on their trust in the camp staff and their program. Again, this is just being part of a closing program. Sense of confidence in talking with your child about camp. We saw 55-ish% of people saying it helped a lot or a great deal. And then the last category, your understanding of what your child experienced while at camp. So by and large, closing programs are effective ways for communicating with parents about the camp experience and equipping them to continue the impacts of that in the home. I'm going to keep moving here just so we have time for questions at the end. We asked about how many times they've been to camp since summer, and then we asked about how many times they've heard from camp since summer. So a very small percentage of people by October had been to camp since summer. It was like 10%. But heard from camp since summer. This was encouraging. A lot of people, almost 50%, had heard from camp either through social media, email, text, physical card in the mail, 2 or 3 times in October since the end of camp. 40% had heard from camp already 4 or more times, and then only like 15% had heard once or not at all. So camps are doing good work to stay connected, but now we have to figure out, okay, what are they talking about, and what impact may it be having on their faith practices or beliefs. So next slide, parent engagement. So we asked camps to tell us, hey, are you sending camper devotionals home? But then we also asked parents to tell us, hey, are you using these tools? And this ended up being really important because a lot of people are sending them home. Not a lot of people are using them. So while your camper was at camp, how often, sorry, that subtext is wrong, Rob. We asked parents, did your camper engage with any camp devotional or Bible study tools that the camp provided? 49% of people said, I don't know. They weren't quite sure. 32% said no, and only 20% said yes. Did you utilize the post-camp discussion tools that camp provided? So this would be things like how to talk to your kid about camp, questions to ask them about their experience. 34% said yes, 43% said no, and 23% were unaware of them or not applicable, didn't have them. Did you utilize the family devotional tools? So these would be tools specifically designed to help families have a devotional, in contrast to discussion tools, which are more just talking about camp. 46% said no, which means they knew that they had them and chose not to use them. That's almost half. And only 28% said yes. And then lastly, did your child talk with a pastor or a youth pastor about their camp experience? 51% said yes. And we'll see in a few moments that this is going to matter for a couple of our outcomes. So varying levels of engagement with the materials that camps are providing. Next slide, Rob. This is just some of our takeaways on these parent beliefs. So we pulled out all the people that were at the ceiling, right? So if on the first survey you chose a 5 on a scale of 5, we pulled them out because they have nowhere to move. And we want to see, of the people that had somewhere to go, what percentage are actually experiencing a change. So 46% of people that did not strongly agree that Christian summer camp is an important tool for faith formation before camp increased their agreement after camp. 36% that did not strongly agree that it was important to be part of a church community increased their agreement after camp. 42% that did not rank faith formation as an extremely important goal of camp before camp increased their agreement. And then 35% that did not rank deepening engagement with the local church as an extremely important goal increased their agreement after camp. And that was a little bit higher amongst partner churches. So we are seeing some growth. It's not the majority, but we are seeing some people grow over time in their understanding of what camp is for and the role that camp and church engagement play in family faith formation. So then this next final slide on these findings is some of our emerging correlational findings. I'm just going to read through them for you. Having a child talk to a pastor about camp was associated with higher levels of church participation after camp. Maybe not surprising, but also kind of encouraging, and an easy action step. If we can get these kids, especially the ones that don't go to church, associated with a pastor, a youth pastor, even a lay leader at a church, and have a conversation, we might be able to increase church attendance. Going to the post-camp closing ceremony was associated with an increase in spiritual camp goals after camp. So we lumped together some of the goals of camp questions, specifically the ones related to spiritual outcomes, and going to the closing camp ceremony led to an increase in the importance of those goals. Using the devotional tools, again, not providing them, but using them, was associated with an increase in faith integration beliefs. So that's that question about whether or not all aspects of camp should relate to faith, as well as an increase in all the family faith practices. Using the discussion tools was associated with an increase in the spiritual camp goals and all the family faith practices. It was also associated with an increase in beliefs about camp and church being partners, and it decreased difficulties talking about faith with the camper. So providing those tools helps reduce some of those challenges. Being a partner church is associated with higher camp church partner beliefs at T3 and lower difficulties talking about faith. And then lastly, camp leaders visiting churches after camp is associated with increased church participation. So when you as a camp leader go to them, your people want to go see you there, and we're seeing higher levels of church attendance there. All right, that was a lot. Sorry, it's a lot of data, I know. Let me pause there for questions, and then we can just talk briefly about the final call to action for anyone that's interested.
I'll throw you one. On item 2 on the last slide, the closing ceremony, is that the kids attending or the parents attending?
Parents.
Okay,
Parents.
thanks.
Yep. Yeah, so in some cases, camps invited parents to an existing closing ceremony with campers and just said like, hey, come join us, sit in the back. And in other cases, they did a special closing ceremony just for parents before they go get their kids. So it's kind of a combination. But the idea is the camp is providing something for parents at pickup beyond just picking up their kids.
Okay, but that association is bulked in with
Yes.
all parents. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I had a quick question on the bullet point 2 from the previous slide.
Yeah.
Going to the post-camp closing ceremony was associated with an increase in spiritual camp goals after camp. Are the spiritual camp goals like the camper acts out or pursues the spiritual camp goals, or I'm just a bit unclear as to increasing what?
Yeah, so Rob, can you go back to slide 24? It's the one with the 2 charts. The core beliefs about camp and importance of, there you go. Yeah, so if you look at this bottom one, importance of various camp goals, growing in faith and learn more about God, equip and influence families, and then deepen family engagement. Those were all lumped together as spiritual camp goals. So it's families are responding to this question with a higher level of importance after camp than they were before camp if they attended the closing ceremony.
Okay, thank you. So it's an increase in the perceived importance of
Yes.
spiritual camp goals. Would you agree?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. For them as a parent, we're saying, how important is this to you as a parent for sending your kid to this goal, for sending your kid to camp? Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah. All right. So last piece here is phase 3. So what are we doing now? We are recruiting camps. We do still have room for a few more if you're interested. So in phase 3, again, we're seeking to go deeper with all of these findings. So we have created a whole bunch of resources on our website that we're inviting camps to engage with. We're going to be doing some more trainings with a subset of our camps. And the idea is to look at varying levels of intervention. So our 9 camps that we've worked with previously, we've spent hours upon hours with them. We were in person, we did a training. That's awesome, but it's really not feasible to replicate that with every camp across the country. So we want to go and say, okay, are there less intensive ways to accomplish these same goals? So our next 2 things that we're testing are, what if we just do online trainings and provide you with a bunch of resources? And then the third one is, what if you just look at the resources? So what we'll do now is we'll repeat our methodology in surveying camper parents, looking at all the same metrics, but we'll look at these 3 different categories of camps: the intensive core camps we've been working with, just the online training and resources, and then the resources only, and compare and contrast differences between them, and continue to roll out our findings as we go to see what we can do. So camps that participate get to obviously participate in the research. You also get customized reports that you can compare then to the aggregate sample and see, kind of like that chart I showed you that had the 9 camps, where you're ahead, where you're behind. I say that in quotes, it's more just difference, but and be part of that learning community. Gives you tools for communicating your impact with parents and churches, tools for communicating with staff to increase your effectiveness. And then we get to continue dialoguing together as part of the project as well. Phase 3 schedule, technically the application deadline was January 15th. We have extended that. The first training cohort meeting is next week. So if we're able to get camps in by them, we would allow them to join that. Otherwise, the resources cohort starts at the end of February. So we are kind of going to allow people to trickle in if they decide they want to be part of that. I think, Rob, yeah, you got that sign. Okay. So if you'd like to be a part of that, I think the next slide will give you a QR code. The ask really, if you want to be a part of it, is just that you engage with the trainings and or the resources that are provided, and then find a couple of churches that are willing to be part of it with you. You don't have to get written commitments or anything. We're just asking that you are able to identify some that you might be able to work with as we go through the process, and then you get all those reports and everything in return. So anyways, that's where we're at. We are excited to keep rolling out the findings. Even if you don't want to join the research, I do encourage you to just get on the email list if you're not already. We're just sending out our reports as we have them, and updates that are relevant to camp professionals, church leaders, parents, etc. So I encourage you to sign up for that if you want to stay in the know of what's coming out.
All right. And then the last thing is, Rachael mentioned we're producing resources, and next year, 2027, when we are able to have time to dig deep into the research, you can see just from the statistics she showed that, I mean, there's unlimited learning in the amount of information we're getting. We had 1,400 parents fill out surveys this year, between the three pre, post, T3, T4. It's like we're going to learn a ton. And so our goal is to produce articles and training, and who knows what will come out of the project. But really, that's what Lily's goal is not just that you come up with info, but you come up with something that can sustain after the process. So we've got a couple of journal articles, Hope book, that kind of stuff to enhance Christian camping. And then the last thing I'll say, is that if you're interested in this kind of learning or this kind of work, this is what our master's degree program at Honey Rock and Wheaton does, is we're trying to train scholars for the Christian camping movement that are scholar practitioners. So not just people up in the clouds thinking about it, but actually doing it. And hopefully you've seen today that, we're trying to enhance through some good thinking the movement of Christian camping and ultimately Christ Church worldwide. So if you or somebody would benefit from being part of our master's degree program and learning how to do this and how to provide that service to Christian camping, would love to have them consider it. So again, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Hope this was beneficial time. If you have further questions or want to talk more, feel free to email us. I think that's it. Any final questions or anything? All right. God bless. Take care. Have a super day.
Thank you.
Gotcha.